I'm Matthew. My brother's going to take over. I'm studying history and telling you the thing. You're here telling everyone they're going to burn in hell if they don't believe it's you. I'm not saying that. Fam, that's what you
If you die upon what you believe,
that's what I'm saying. But I'm not telling him that. I'm not telling him if he believes what he believes he's not going to go burn in hell. But yet you're telling me that I wasn't there. I'm bent over everything.
A lot of cameras
You come and tell me.
there's a lot of cameras
you come and tell me impose that I'm gonna burn in hell, but you're telling me when I'm talking about history.
I didn't tell you about burning in hell.
I wasn't there.
I didn't tell. We wasn't even talking about Islam. We wasn't talking about Islam at all. Now CME's come. He wants to try to act like a big man.
So what I'm saying,
Respect's not a big man.
They define. No, I can't go at him, man. You mad? So when we're talking about chattel slavery, we have to make the distinctions between what chattel slavery was. And the people who inflicted chattel slavery, they chose where it was. They decided to have a big meeting in Germany where they decided to chop up Africa, and they gave it out. So here you can have Uganda, you have Somalia. They decided to push a narrative across the whole of Europe that would accept it, that black people or African people are 3/5 of a human being, and this is the reason why they must be enslaved. This is like one of the core principles of chattel slavery. They ain't even chattel slavery without that. Without saying that we're 3/5 of a human being, you can't even convince the rest of the white culture to back you on these expeditions to enslave the rest of people.
Good. So does it need to be 3/5 of a human being specifically, or can it be any sort of like you're a lesser human? If for example the Congoloid or like Bantu people kind of viewed pygmies as sort of lesser humans, would that suffice?
That would not be chattel, but that would be wrong. But have you seen documentation or any kind of script that says we are superior to the pygmy? Have you seen it yourself?
No, I've read about this kind of a little bit, like not in huge depth, right. but still it seems like kind of. What I kind of heard when I first heard kind of Raspak talking was that kind of the slavery amongst Africans was kind of a sort of equal tribal warfare slavery, where kind of it was just like about if you're enemy tribes, you wouldn't consider each other lesser human beings, but it's like you need to pay back this debt for like this war, and like whereas without any kind of inherent sort of idea of supremacy and like dehumanization. But I think like from what I have read about like the treatment of pygmies by kind of these people who are like kind of pretty small and so on. Kind of the treatment of pygmies does indicate to me.
I condemn any sort of prejudice.
I'm sure you do, but
it's not racism. So what I'm saying is, chattel slavery was when a whole race of people was defined as 3/5 of a human being. These people that are pygmies are still Africans. It's still Africans. The best you could use is tribalism. That pygmy would have been a part of a tribe. Them other people would have been a part of a tribe, and now they're exploiting. Or you could, and in Africa, you would have had a tribe that thinks they're better than another tribe. You would have had the Somalis that think they're better than Ethiopians. They was at war, but it's not called chattel slavery when they capture each other. Do you get what I'm saying?
Right.
But yet one says that I'm better than the other. Do you know what I'm saying? They might say our phenotype is better. They might say our culture is better. They might say our food is better. They might say our history is better. The Somalis might say we're Muslims, so we're better. The Ethiopians might say we're Christians, so we're better. And they might go to war based on that.
When does that become dehumanizing? When does that kind of like we're better become sort of dehumanization?
No, it's tribal. So we're against tribalism. Do you understand that?
Yeah.
So we're against the tribal mentality amongst black people, which does that. So that is something that we definitely are continuously opposing, and not even just tribalism within Africa, but now because of the dichotomy of chattel slavery, there's a new tribalism within the Caribbean and people in Africa. We got a tribalism where people in the Caribbean think they're better than people from Africa, and people in Africa sometimes think they're better than people from the Caribbean. But this is not racism or chattel slavery. What you could say is it could be the nucleus that could start that. It's a coulda, woulda, shoulda. It might be, but there's a lot of might be's in the world. But the fact of actually what did happen in history from the mentality and what we've actually seen, that fact of chattel slavery, there's no coulda, woulda, shoulda that can erase that.
Wait, sorry. Are you trying to justify European slavery? No. So what's your actual point? I know, but
it's good to ask, but I'm not. But no, it's just I wanted to maybe raise with you the fact that maybe like it seemed to me like you're characterizing all slavery in pre-colonial Africa as being just kind of only tribal and like kind of tit for tat and like based around kind of warfare. without any kind of supremacist ideology and dehumanizing ideology. Whereas I think, I'm not sure if you're aware of this or not, but I think it'd be maybe a good idea to like look into the treatment of pygmies.
No, we have. I can't speak to Robert.
Okay, so,
no, I know about the treatment of
pygmies. So the question is like, kind of,
what we're conflating
do you think that they were kind of like considered like to be sort of lesser human beings on account of their like small stature?
That's one side of the story.
I think they were exploited because of their size. As in, it was like an easy win at the time.
Yeah,
which is a bad thing. But it isn't a like for like of what happened in the European slave trade. Not at all.
Okay.
It's not at all. It's like night and day.
So
it's wrong. All wrong. That's like stealing to feed your family is wrong. Just like stealing when you're rich against tons of poor people is wrong. But one is more majorly wrong.
Yeah.
So that's how we see it. It's so wrong. Slavery is wrong. So I'm not going to agree to any form of slavery. But they say it's like for like between what happened to the pygmies and what happened to the Africans to the Caribbean.
Yeah. I wouldn't agree that it's like for like, definitely. But
I mean, it's night and day. In
of course, sure.
But it's all wrong. Just like all theft is wrong.
But if you did find kind of some evidence that showed to you that kind of these people who were enslaving pygmies did have some dehumanizing attitudes,
condemn that group, and if they're still about, make them pay reparations.
Do you think that it was kind of closer to chattel slavery?
Listen, condemn that group, and if you find a group that does it, make them pay reparations to the pygmies.
So what you've identified, Africa's a big place, right? And if there's one tribe that mistreats another tribe, then what he's saying, they have to pay. Like I said, there's so much mistreatment going around the world. We can't just say one group of people is good, one group of people is bad, innit? But across the board, the behavioural practice of the governing bodies of Europe, who go into other countries, were very consistent in how they enslave people, and they will learn from each other on how to mistreat people. You know what I'm saying? And that's why they try to domesticate the African people. And we're calling that process chattel slavery, which we're 100% against.
Okay, so I mean, like, do you recognise that like other people would use chattel slavery and they would just use it to refer to any kind of sort of dehumanising slavery where you kind of work people to the bone, and they wouldn't recognise, for example, making people lose their origins or their religion or their language as a necessary part of chattel slavery? Like,
yeah, I think that it's like when they define racism. It's like someone who's a rapist defining what rape is.
Okay.
Like, you just raped 100 women, but you want to define rape as if the woman doesn't say no 10 times. Do you know what I'm saying? It's the same way when Europeans thought they could define what racism was to black people.
Right.
How can someone who's European, who's never been through racism, think that he can define for us what this experience of racism was? Which is why there's black people that came from the scholar class in America that came together and they came up with a definition that actually represents the people. Do you know what I'm saying? And that definition came out of just the blanket definition that the Europeans were using, and it went into racism is prejudice plus power.
Okay.
So it actually explained what we was going through. So the power being chattel slavery in the beginning, colonialism in the middle, and institutional racism now. We can so this is the core of racism. So what I'm saying is, you, for me personally, even though you can have racist thoughts and you can be racist, you're not the problem. You're like, even if you was EDL or far right, you're not my biggest problem. You might hear me talking about them, but they're small fries. Yeah, but what you can do is you can push a narrative that is already being pushed by the higher ups, that is affecting me in banking, that is affecting me in schooling, that is affecting me in police, that is affecting me in other race areas. Whereas no matter what I say about you, no matter what narrative I push, it's not going to affect you on an institutional level.
Okay.
Do you know what I'm saying? You're not going to go into a bank and not get a loan because you're white, because of some guy said at Speaker's Corner. Whereas you could actually say something and it could actually be in line with the racism that we've already seen. So we know that people that have African last names, they're less likely to get a job. Regardless of whether they're better for the job, regardless of what their qualifications are saying, simply based upon their last name, they can be discriminated against. So this is what we're talking about when we're saying slavery, racism, and that goes back to defining slavery. In another way, the same Europeans tried to define what slavery was, and the way they tried to define it was in a way to escape again. Do you know what I'm saying? In a way to not take full accountability. So they tried to define what the slavery was, but they tried to leave out some of the detrimental parts to that slavery system. Do you know what I'm saying? For example, beating our names and taking away our cultures that was detrimental to chattel slavery. There's no chattel slavery without it. There's no chattel slavery without it. Taking people from one place to the next place, there's no chattel slavery without it. Without the trade triangle, there's no chattel slavery. So, but they don't add that to the definition. They try to make a blanket definition that applies to a wider amount of people to make it seem like our slavery is just the same as everyone else's. So when this word slavery comes up, anyone in the crowd that doesn't know any better, they just think it's all the same. If you say there was slavery in Africa and I say, oh yeah, everyone was slaves. Do you know what I'm saying? But we're not looking into the system and seeing exactly what people are complaining about.
Okay. Do you think no group of people have undergone chattel slavery in history apart from Africans then? Because that kind of experience of like both being taken to a new country and having their kind of language and religion sort of educated and beaten out of them.
Do you know any? Do you know any?
What?
Do you know any?
I'm not sure, but
I don't know any.
Okay.
So that's both of us don't know any.
Okay.
So the question you asked, we don't have the answer to.
Okay. But so are you kind of open to that possibility, or do you think no? I don't think that's the.
Well, one thing I never want people to think is, as black people, we go around trying to compare wounds. Like my wound's bigger than yours. So the concept of chattel slavery and the concept of slavery is wrong, right? But one thing you do find is if there was any other people group that were enslaved, you find that there were reparations paid, right? So we understand the Irish have actually been enslaved, right? But we understand that they were given reparations. They were given things afterwards to actually compensate for that. The only people group I'm aware of that haven't received that is the people we know as Africans.
Okay.
And then that even goes.
There must be people.
And that goes right back into the obviously African. I say we're not even the worst off because you have people from Native American and Australia Aboriginal lands that were completely wiped out.
Yes.
So the fact that we're still here is very good because I personally believe that if certain people had it their way, it might have been a full genocide attempt. I just think it was impossible for this to be carried out how it was carried out in Native America and how it's carried out in Australia. Because anywhere they brought slavery, resistance followed. So even when they tried to put down our freedom to Europeans in the parliament giving us freedom, that is a lie from the pit of hell. Europeans in the parliament voted for freedom after what? After the Haitian Revolution. After Haiti had their revolution and the French sent the English and the Spanish and they was both defeated. Did the English people say 1 minute these people can revolt? Now imagine if this revolt happens here, which is the home. That would be detrimental to the slave masters, right? So this is why they had to nip it in the bud here. That's why slavery had to stop here. But then once they stopped it here, if they're stopping slavery here and people are doing slavery everywhere, what's going to happen in 50 years? Everyone's going to pass. So this is why they had to get together now and stop everyone else from doing slavery. So it wasn't because, we like these black people and we believe in their humanity and let's fight for them. Don't get it twisted. There was people like, I think his name was John Brown in America, who was on the front line with the man, white guy.
And he died for
the cause. So I'm not saying that this is all white people, but I'm saying amongst the political powers that be, whether you're talking about America or England, they didn't necessarily want to free Africans. They was forced to free Africans because everywhere they brought this thing called slavery, resistance followed.
Okay, so kind of two questions I have is, do you think that the kind of ideological abolitionist movement amongst kind of white people back in those days was kind of an insignificant factor to slavery ending when it did? So why don't we start with that?
I think it's significant. I think it has to be put into context. So people act like the guy. What's the guy in America?
Nate. What?
No, the president in America that Abraham Lincoln. People talk about Abraham Lincoln ending slavery, but they don't point out the fact that Abraham Lincoln didn't want to end slavery. It was for other political reasons why he ended slavery. So I feel like it's disingenuous to the history when people try to put it forward like we was freed out of the goodness of people's hearts.
It wasn't economically beneficial to have slavery. We have industrial revolution happening in the north, while the south was still doing cotton picking and stuff. So it's not good economics.
So you think like all these kind of European countries, it kind of simultaneously became kind of bad economics for them to continue slavery? And so
I think it's bad economics, one, because technology's changed, but also rebellion. Like people could think that black people, African people were just happy to go along with it, but the rebellion cost money and it cost life and cost property damage. It wasn't beneficial.
Everywhere they took it cost money. We're talking about the Maroons in Jamaica. You're talking about the revolutionaries in Guyana. Anywhere they took it groups revolted, and a lot of the time these revolts cost more money than what they was making, especially when the man was smart and burnt down the whole place.
Yeah. I think that's definitely a big factor. But do you think it accounts for how the European powers, they kind of had conferences where they kind of like try to sort of enact an international kind of treaty to like kind of pressurize other European countries to end slavery as well? So if it was just self-interest economically, then they might end slavery themselves, but then like not care whether other people.
No, but why did they do that? Why did they do that, James? Think about it. Use your brain.
I think part of it would be because of
if we've ended slavery here, because I'm not saying there wasn't any principles. I'm sure there was people in there that had good principles that wanted to see the end of slavery. But I want to know what the push is.
Okay.
What's the final? What's the final house?
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm saying that if we stop slavery here, because we've seen the Haitian Revolution and we're scared of a revolution here. Yeah. Because remember, even the Haitian every revolution, you're going to have white people that are involved as well.
Yeah.
So
there's Polish involved in the Haitian.
100%. Yeah. So what they were scared of here isn't just the black people revolting. That wouldn't have been the thing. What they're also probably scared of is white people rising up with the black people and revolting.
Which happened. Yeah? Which has happened. And in America, when the poor whites united with the poor blacks, but then they started telling the poor whites that you're actually better than the poor blacks, and that's where you start getting that new division. But there's something I wanted to raise with you, like when they actually banned slavery, did they compensate the slave masters or the enslavers, or did they compensate the enslaved?
The enslaved masters.
There you go. So that shows you that there was not this a mutual humanity going on. Because if something is wrong, it's like right now, if men go around raping women now, right, and we go, let's stop the raping, right? Do we start like focus on the men who raped, or do we focus on the women who's been raped? What do you do?
Yeah, you should focus on the women.
Right, so that shows that the humanity then wasn't mutual. It wasn't a universal.
And that goes right back to what we were saying, yeah? Because you asked about reparations. You talked about reparations. Now the Jewish war lasted 8 years.
There you go.
Yeah, 8 years. The war with the Hitler and that lasted maximum 8 years. African enslavement wasn't 5 years, wasn't 10 years, wasn't 20 years, wasn't 40 years, wasn't 50 years, wasn't 100 years, wasn't 200 years, 400 years plus.
There you go.
Yeah?
Quite a lot.
Yeah? So this is what we're dealing with, yeah? So this is what we're coming out of.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So we're coming out of this 400 years plus reparation. We've seen the Jews went through a little 8-year war. I'm not saying it wasn't horrendous what they went through, but if it's in comparison to chattel slavery, it's not comparable.
Okay.
Yeah? And we're seeing that they're getting reparations till today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're seeing that in the history books.
Oh yeah, they are. Yeah.
In the history books, Germany are demonized and vilified till today. Every year I learned about Hitler as the biggest criminal on the planet. Do you know what I'm saying? So we're seeing that from the outside, and then we're seeing how we're treated. We're seeing that when they did end the slavery, and the reason why they did end the slavery, James, was because like they feared Revolution 1, yeah? And if I end slavery here, what happens if I allow France and Spain to carry on slavery? What's going to happen over a space of 50 years?
I'm not sure.
Economically, what's going to happen if I stop slavery? If I was doing slavery, and slavery what got me on the top. Yeah. Remember, slavery's what got me on the top. I'm on the top through slavery. Yeah. Now I'm at the top. I've stopped slavery where I'm at. This thing that made me at the top, I've stopped it. Yeah. Because it's in my best interest to stop it.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, when I've stopped it, if all the other countries around me are still doing it, and that's how I got to the top, what's going to happen with all these other countries?
Well, like according to this, like they might get on top.
They are gonna get on top over time.
We've made a little contradiction here, because if a big part of the reason why slavery was ended was because it's economically kind of not viable due to kind of the risk of revolution and shifting technology, it's no longer viable. It's no longer successful to kind of like carry out slavery.
No, but it's not just that.
Then we wouldn't worry.
It's not that. It's not just that. It's not just that. It's also scared. Remember, they stopped it here. So when they stopped it here, why are they stopping it here? Because they fear revolution here. Do you know what I'm saying? I think that's one of the main reasons. So if we fear revolution here, yeah, and we stop it here, what's going to happen over there? Because we don't know if there's going to be a revolution. We don't know if they're going to get their things burned down. We might hope it in our English hearts that the French plantations are going to burn when we stop it. We might hope that the Spanish ones get burned down, but we ain't 100% sure. So over a 50-year, 100-year process, these nations are going to surpass. So the safest thing to go around the rest of the world and shut down all slavery.
Okay.
And we're now, because remember, we're already at the top. We're already on the top. We're the biggest colony. So we can shut down everyone else. You know what I'm saying? So that is the way I read the history. And I feel like that is further echoed. That is further echoed by the fact that when the Jewish Holocaust was over, like I said, they get reparations. They're allowed. If a Jewish person can prove they got Jewish blood, they can go back to their country for free. Right now, yeah. Whereas us, I still need a passport, I still need money to go back to the place that was taken away from me, yeah? And on top of that, instead of us getting reparations, like the Jewish people, instead of the victims getting the reparations, the slave master got the reparations, yeah? And
that happened in south of the United States, definitely.
100%, and even here, yeah? And those slave masters were people like David Cameron's family, you know Crown Paint in B&Q? You ever seen Crown Paint? In B&Q.
What do you mean Crown Paint?
There's a brand called Crown.
Right.
It's a paint. You find it in B&Q. Yeah, that is David Cameron's family, and those were people that benefited directly from the slave trade. So a lot of the institutions that we're seeing now, whether it's the banking, or whether it's politics, a lot of these people descend directly from the people who actually got the reparations from our slavery.
Yeah.
So we're still being run by the slave owners.
100%.
Oh.
So it's just like if you look at even the history of European slavery, there's so much different points in the history where white men slip up, where they have conversations about how to control the slaves. Do you know what I'm saying? So there was a white man that said, I think he said the Spanish, they was wrong, they was beating their slaves too much. You have to be a bit nice to them so they don't revolt. These conversations are recorded. Willie Lynch set the dark skin against the light skin. These conversations are recorded. There's a guy in Africa, I forgot his name, but he said basically if you can take away their culture and make them idolize English culture more than they idolize their own, they will become submissive to us. So these are all in the history. These are all people that led the slave, and they all had conversations about how to keep us subdued. Do you know what I'm saying? So what that point is to say is that if you wanted to control us in this day and age and you didn't feel like the aggressive way was going to work, what you do is you just change the system. You know what I'm saying? And that's what I feel like we're living in now. I feel like it's a lot more covert, but I feel like the mentalities are still there. But this is what I do believe. I do believe that the mentalities amongst black, white, and Asian people, especially amongst the youngers, is dynamically changing. Yeah, especially in London. I don't know about outside of London.
We're gaining more knowledge than we used to.
Especially in London, because of integration. And because white people are growing up with black people and black people are growing up with Asian people, we're communicating a lot more.
It's more inclusive.
Yeah, so the mentality, but what we have to remember is that black people are only 6% of the UK at whole. No, not even black people, coloured people. So even though we have this dichotomy in London and we feel safe, the minute you get out of London,
it might be different.
Yeah, things change up.
Okay. Well, one thing, I think, very fair. One thing earlier was about kind of asking whether any other kind of group has sort of undergone sort of chattel slavery, and you brought up that kind of you guys didn't get the worst of it because like indigenous Australians were basically wiped out and indigenous kind of other people, and even though I can't at the moment think of another example of chattel slavery, there are kind of definitely I can think of examples of like ethnic groups being like fully wiped out as a result of kind of another ethnic group arriving. Like,
do you know who's doing the wiping out though? Do you know who's doing the wiping out?
Well, like I'm thinking of examples from like quite early in history, from like you can find sort of suddenly kind of all the Y DNA, all the kind of male DNA suddenly kind of comes from another ethnic group. So it basically shows that all the men of that ethnic group get wiped out.
That's prehistory, right? You're talking about
probably prehistory. There are examples from prehistory, and like I think they'll also kind of find examples from like sort of kind of early history.
That's hard for us to talk about prehistory. It is quite hard, but
if you can show that it's happened sort of genetically.
This is wrong. But once again, it's not documented how it is recently.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
The thing is, you see when we're talking about chattel slavery, I'm talking about in the 60s, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
My grandma was hanging in a tree in America. You get me? Like, it's not a thing where I got to go in any books and I got to compare sources.
He's talking about comparing bones from like 200,000 years ago and the DNA. This is a bit different. We got pictures. And you see me next to my grandma. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's me as a boy. There's my grandma hanging. It's a very different dynamic.
And you got all the white people smiling in the picture.
Yeah. It's a very different dynamic.
Yeah, it's much more recent.
Well, it has an emotional impact on the people group.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you're talking about a people group who we don't know what they were, who they were, what they were doing, but we recognize that through the DNA was changing by the bone structure, right? Well, we don't know that story. We do know this story.
Yeah.
We can read it and watch it on video. Sure. We can watch black people being killed. Do you know what I mean? Sure. We can watch that and go, that's not nice, isn't it? Yeah. What's that about?
Do you know where the term picnic come from?
What?
Picnic.
Picnic?
Yeah.
No.
It comes from the term pick a nigger. Yeah?
Okay.
So when you see those pictures with a black person hanging and loads of white people smiling, that was the original picnic.
And then they like lay out a tablecloth and eat some sandwiches.
Probably.
Okay.
So this, you know what I mean. So this is what we don't. So for example, even the Aborigine tale, the Aborigines weren't enslaved as we were, but they were wiped out. Yeah. So we reckon that's bad. Just like the Native Indians, many of them were wiped out.
To the point where there's like 5% DNA of them today. Like, do you know what I'm saying? That is completely.
But then there's also the psychological trauma. So there are many Aborigines and Native become drunk alcoholics. This was a culture concept introduced into them, and even with low self-esteem, you have Native Indian women trying to marry Europeans. So even though they were given land, the Europeans are getting the land back through marriage.
Do you know how they introduced alcohol? Do you know how they were introduced
the white people that come and pretend they're Indians.
Do you know how they were introduced to alcohol?
By Europeans.
No, because the Europeans knew that genetically they had a low tolerance to alcohol, so they introduced it on purpose.
They introduced that, and they also introduced smallpox in blankets.
Yeah, in blankets.
And they killed their buffalo as well.
Oh, yeah, they did a lot. But this is after
Where the
Native
Buffalo
Indians
Soldier song comes
taught the Europeans how to farm the land.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, this is an ongoing genocide that we try to rectify.
And that's the next thing, like, you know, like certain time man will come and say, yeah, it's guns up, we got beef with you. But the Europeans never done that. They always done this friendship thing first.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
They
always come and they're trading and then it's all good and then one day,
they just wipe them out.
Bam!
Yeah.
Man, switch it up on you. You know what I'm saying? You thought my man was a friend, but he's not. You know what I'm saying?
It's all deception.
Yeah, whereas if you look at a lot of other cultures, there's always a reality. We kind of knew. Like, we don't like your tribe, I don't like my tribe. When we see you, man, we know where it is. You know what I'm saying? But the way that the chattel slavery was even executed was a lot more snaky, it was a lot more backdoor. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot more deception involved. Do you know what I'm saying? Which is why I think a lot of black people that are very versed in our history some of them have trust issues to this day.
Of course,
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because they don't know who's being real and who's being fake.
For many black historians, you find an angry person. You have to be trained how to control your emotions if you're going to identify as a black historian. Because when you go through the papers, it's shocking.
Even me, when people see me, think I'm angry and think it's because of the history. Fam.
Yeah, you study it.
And then I'm talking and people don't get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I start getting mad. But the thing is, I got to understand the other person isn't aware of the knowledge that I've got.
There you go.
Like even Goodbye Uncle Tom, all of them. I wish I didn't even watch half of these documentaries. You know what I'm saying? Because all you do is get angry. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But at the same time, you need to know what happened in order to be empowered.
And that's why we show there is no like for like. Like I said, I'm trying to find that like for like. I'm trying to find that people group where people of Africa went around doing what was done to them to others. I'm trying to find it. I haven't seen it.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? And like I said, if you look at like what the Nazis did to the Jews. Yeah, well, the Nazis a few years before were doing that in Africa. Yeah, is it Namibia? Namibia?
Namibia.
Yeah, Namibia. It's hard to pronounce, right? But they did that. They wiped out whole groups of people. No reparations. You Google it. It's there, right? Look at Leopold II. Leopold II, right? Belgium, right? Yeah.
In Congo.
Yeah. No. So when you ask me the worst recent European killer. Europeans say Hitler because Hitler killed Europeans. But they don't say Leopold who killed much more. And there was no reparations. You know what I mean? People from Congo go to Belgium all the time. No one even talks about it. There's statues in Belgium of Leopold on a horse and everything. Whatever.
Yeah.
So this is what I'm saying about I'm still waiting for the like for like.
Okay.
You know? And when you find it, you let me know.
Okay, cool.
Yeah?
Fair enough.
But for right now, we say that black people have been the most mistreated, and the people group who've been the most mistreating have been the elites from the European side.
What did you say?
The elites from the European side.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Okay.
So until you can give us some different story, and talking about the Pygmies and Pygmies and so forth, this is tragic and bad, and we will condemn that to the cow comes home,
100%.
and we'll make sure if we can they pay reparations if what they did was worth of reparations. But there is still no like for like.
And what I want to say is, me personally, you might hear me talking sometimes because people bring up the thing, hey, you see me, I'm passionate, but people think I got some victim mentality. I ain't got victim mentality. Like, I feel like the people who don't talk about it, people that are scared because they want to fit in with this culture and fit in the society, and they don't want to offend James, I feel like them people have more of the victim mentality than someone who speaks out boldly against the oppression, regardless of the consequences. You know what I'm saying? But even me personally, I don't want to, like, even from next year, slavery is not something that I want to talk about. It's not something that I feel like we should be talking about. I feel like we should be talking about group economics, building better. I think we should be focusing more on the future. I think that sometimes the problem is that people sometimes devalue what happened in our history and minimalize what happened in our history, and then that makes us have to go back and discuss it and talk about it. But in general,
there has to be a justification of why. So when you talk about group economics, there has to be a justification of why we do that as we stand today,
100%.
and that is the one justification of the history of what's happened, right? But sometimes we don't mention it. People go, "You just why are you talking about your own group thing? Why are you helping each other? What's that about?" But there's a historical context of why it's necessary for us to do it. That's why we need brothers like respect to have that passion to get people like
Raven, you know what I mean? To direct it. You get me?
That's why we do it, brother. That's what's about.
Can I ask you guys one more question to get your input? You
won't call you a Negro folk. Don't worry, you're good, James. I know you get a lot of set for asking questions.
No, don't worry. So when the Europeans did this kind of colonization and massive mistreatment of Africa, it was on kind of a larger scale than other kind of injustices in history, and it kind of would have resulted in like kind of you could make the case that it resulted in like kind of greater suffering and greater loss of life and so on. So I was just wondering whether you thought that is explained by Europeans having a kind of different psychology from other groups of people around the world, or is it because Europeans had access to a greater technological advantage than had ever been present in the world before? Because earlier in history, if you're like the superpower and you're kind of going to oppress the people around you, you still need to kind of do it on horseback. You don't have like firepower. You don't have like rifles. You don't have you aren't able to project your power over the seas with ships and like massive factories and so on. So I'm wondering whether you think the greatest harm caused by Europeans is due to their kind of having a different psychology from the rest of the world, or do you think it's just like any other race of people would have acted similarly if they had the same kind of comparative advantage?
When you're looking at Europeans, the reason why I don't take it very personally is if you look at the Europeans' history is how they was treating each other before they came into contact with anyone else. It was disgusting. It was barbaric. It was burning women as witches because they didn't believe in Christianity. And there's so much different parts of the history that are just savage amongst each other, drinking blood out of the skulls of each other and all of these things. So I feel like that mentality comes from your environment. I believe that we're all products of our environment. If you're in a cold and pessimistic environment, I believe that's going to have an influence on your character and the way you behave. You know what I'm saying?
Close access to resources, right?
100%.
So, do you know what I mean? So if someone's from a warm land where you don't have to jump to a cave to keep warm, the fruits are there. The season ain't going to kill your fruit.
You don't have to kill your grandma.
You have people claiming stuff, right? That's because there is stuff there, so you have to claim what you see. When something's in abundance, that might change. But to answer your question, when you look at, say, the invention of gunpowder, which is from the Chinese, right? Chinese did gunpowder, right? They had fireworks and cannons and so forth.
Even in Kemet.
Yeah. Then you had the Ottomans who took that, made a cannon and took over what was the last remnants of Rome, right? Right. So despite this, they still had ways of operating. But when the Europeans got gunpowder, it changed everything. They weren't acting like the Chinese. Like the Chinese have had gunpowder from day, right? But you don't have any kind of stories of China going around the world doing what they're doing. So obviously, the environment changes the execution of the technology. So I think that's a contributing factor.
I think the mentality of when they got the weaponry, you get me? That was different because, like I said, when you come from a more pessimistic background, you know what I'm saying, and then you're coming to this place and you're seeing it. Right, imagine you come from the cold, you get me, and then you're coming to this place and these people are in the sun. There's loads of fruits and vegetables. You know what I'm saying? Like, it might create a pathology where you want what these people will have. When you're going to these people and you're seeing they've got gold in abundance. Gold is just on the seashore. It's just normal. You know, like gold is just on the seashore, normal. You know, like pebbles of gold, real gold, just on the seashore. But for you value this stone because that comes from a bit of a caveman. Even this love for like shiny stones, it comes from a caveman mentality. You see a rock, it's shinier than the rest. Ooh, shiny rock. You know what I'm saying? And you just love this rock, but you love this rock more than you love humanity.
Okay. So
Do you know what I'm saying? So there's an issue now. You see more value in this rock, this inanimate rock that can't do anything for anyone, and you see in humanity, in another human being. So I feel like that was the mentality that we saw executed.
Okay. And do you think that's the reason that culture kind of developed was partially because of the kind of cold climate and the competition for resources compared with like maybe more fertile, hotter environments?
Yeah,
I think that's a contributing factor.
That would have been a contributing factor.
Okay, so...
And I feel like it's the mentality to how to use the weaponry. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like, okay, let me put it for example. If I come to you now, James, if you're a nice person and I'm more like, if I've got less rules on my morality, yeah, you're just gonna be trusting me, normal. You're just thinking, yeah, Raspet, we're going to get something to eat. But you ain't got it in your head that all I want to do is wait till you look to the left and put some poison in your food in McDonald's. So if I've got that mentality and you've got a more trusting mentality, I'm always going to be able to get one over on you.
Yeah.
It's not even just the military, it's the mentality. You know what I'm saying? And I don't think that we as Africans at that time was ready for that mentality.
No,
I don't think we was prepared
everything
for
I've
that.
read, the Africans were not prepared for that way of thinking.
Okay. So do you think, therefore, that perhaps South Europeans who live in kind of quite hot Mediterranean climates...
Oh, let me say one more thing. You see, because remember, the Slavs, the original slaves, the original word for slave was Slavs, and that was Eastern Europeans.
Yeah.
So it didn't start out with us.
Sure,
you know what I'm saying? It started out with them enslaving their own. You know what I'm saying? But as that got on, and as they saw the resources in Africa and they saw the richness in Africa, and then they wanted to. And the thing is with the Slavs when they was enslaving Europeans, they was getting a lot of revolt from other Europeans. Which is why this whole 3/5 of a human being thing had to be created. It had to be created because the people might not even the actual populace of Europe might not even consign slavery in the way they did if the African people were not actually vilified and dehumanized in their minds.
Yeah.
And we can see that same process happening today in the media when they try to paint us as criminals. Back in the day, it was 3/5 of a human being. Now it's criminals. But even when they paint that narrative of us being criminals, it makes it seem like we're less civilized than other people in society.
Yeah.
When you actually look at it, the youths in the streets, Jerome might stab Tyrone, and it's wrong, and I hate it because Jerome's my brother and Tyrone's my brother. Yeah. So every time one dies and one goes to jail, it's horrible for me. But I cannot compare Jerome and Tyrone to the foreign policy of this country and things that Tony Blair and David Cameron have just signed on a dotted line and co-signed.
Yeah. So I kind of disagree with you about your idea that sort of European culture might have become more kind of bloodthirsty or cutthroat or savage as a result of like the cold climate. Yeah. And two reasons I have for that are sort of one. Kind of one of
it's not just the cold climate, it's the raw flesh as well. I know.
So like
it's the raw flesh as well, though.
Okay. So you mean like inbred lines of kings? Is that what you mean?
No, I'm saying that obviously if you look at like African culture pre-slavery, there's a high vegetarian, like 2 months, 3 months they're eating vegetarian, and then once a month someone might eat chicken because if you've got chickens on your farm or fish, you get. But if you got these things that you can't eat every day, it's not mass produced. But I'm saying in Europe there's a lot more raw flesh eating. And there's actually studies that show that if you eat raw flesh, like you know the raw steak that the man them get, and they put it for 10 seconds so that the blood gets warm and they eat it. But there's actually studies that but there's studies that show if you're when you're consuming blood, you get me, it's more likely to affect your mentality in the way of someone who's bloodthirsty.
Right.
So I feel like there was a much more bloodthirsty mentality in Europe than in Africa.
So what do you think about how, for example, the Spanish, kind of from the Mediterranean Spanish, kind of they inflicted one of the more brutal, I'd say, kind of colonial attempts, or maybe equally brutal colonial attempts in Mesoamerica and South America. But Spain is kind of much warmer than say Britain is.
Yeah.
And another kind of sort of counterexample would be if you look in history, kind of there are empires that have their history recorded in the Middle East, like the Assyrians, who their kings were known to be like so brutal that they do displays like skinning the flesh of like 100 children and then making a big totem but doesn't it show that like kind of heat doesn't necessarily
I'm not saying just
affect
saying contributing factor.
Remember,
so what I'm saying is even in this country, when I'm in this country, I'm more pessimistic. I'm more negative.
Yeah.
Especially
like
during the winter,
seasonally
I'm more
affected
negative.
Depression.
Yeah. Like, do you know what I'm saying? I like my mentality is more dark and dull during the cold.
It's contributing factors, right? And he's mentioned
but
one,
when the sun comes out,
it's better, right?
I'm like, I don't really want to have no fights or nothing like that.
Hear his point. And then I hear a point of that not actually having the resources in abundance, right? And realize when you find something, you have to quickly own it because it might not be there for long.
Yeah.
Very different mentality for someone who's in their resource. Their trees, their animals, whatever, they're in it. Yeah, and this is their day-to-day reality. And they don't have to worry that in the wintertime they're going to freeze to death. You don't have to worry about it.
Which creates a necessity to enslave other people for your industrial revolution because you need these resources on the ground.
Yeah.
Like you don't have the resources ain't over here. All we got is apples and pears.
Look up the war between you know the war between Rome and Cleopatra and Rome, right?
Yeah.
And the main thing was how they were going to control is by cutting off Egyptian grain.
Yeah, the wheat,
because Rome could not survive without Egyptian grain, apparently, right?
Yeah.
So obviously, this is what I'm saying. But Egypt could survive with their own grain, right?
Yeah.
And that's why Cleopatra had that kind of that angle, and that's why they went to war, right? So I'm saying is, look at the resources of England. A lot of the resources came from outside of England. A lot of the way of life that England wanted to maintain happened from outside. A lot of the things that we count as British culture, like tea and stuff, wasn't coming from England, right? So how do you have to control that? You know what I'm saying? That you have to set up situations so you can get there. So these are the contributing factors. And like India didn't need to export anything, did they? Right? India was self-sustaining. But at the time, was England self-sustaining?
Well, like when you have a new opportunity to trade, kind of you're going to take advantage of it. So you wouldn't say that like you were lacking. If you don't have the opportunity to trade, then you make do with whatever you have. You'll eat your kind of your grains and your oats.
Yeah, but if you're content, you're content, right? Like there's cultures that are content with what is going on. There's many cultures where they don't seek outside of it because they're content. England wasn't content, right? For whatever reason, it could be, but it wasn't fair trade that got England the stuff it wanted. There was exploitation, which, whether that's good or bad, it is what it is. But what I'm saying is, that's what we see today.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, okay, I understand your position. I kind of don't fully agree in that. I think that if, for example, like a Middle Eastern country had like the Industrial Revolution and somebody had like a much greater military technology and ability to project power, that then we'd have seen Middle Eastern colonialism. Like China's a good counterexample because China has been like pretty solid for like a long time.
All right, well let me tell you this.
But I think.
Are you aware of Mansa Musa?
Yes.
Right, and if what the Moroccans and the Egyptians and the Spanish recorded at that time, that empire was the richest, right?
Yeah.
Now the only thing they recorded was this man going away giving away money. Something happened in the mentality of that in that culture where they had all the money they needed, and rather than actually go and Mansa Musa, they said rather than take others, we're going to give it away. Very different mentality.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is one African way of thinking. Yeah.
Okay.
And these were African people who lived in isolation from everyone else. And the only reason they left was because Mansa Musa at the time was a Muslim. And it was very important for a Muslim culture to make the Hajj and go to Mecca and so forth, right? So on his Hajj, he started giving away. This is what was documented from the Moroccans, the Egyptians, and the Spanish, right? So if he had the money, he could have just, but it could be different. Made an army system and tried to take over them, right, and get even more. So very different dynamics.
Okay, all right.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's a good example, but I know I'd see that as maybe like a reflection of his personal character, and I'd hesitate to kind of extrapolate from that kind of maybe Africans have
he wasn't the first Mansa. There was many Mansas before him and after him, and even though the empire's crumbled many years after his death, there was no history of them doing that same kind of behavioural pattern.
But the thing is, though, kind of, we need to kind of compare like with like, because the equivalence, if you don't have like the ability to kind of like project power across oceans, then the closest equivalent to colonialism you're going to do is you're going to invade your kind of neighbouring country, and so we can't sort of like discount that as a kind of insight into contentedness or.
Did the Chinese have ships?
Yeah.
Okay, and we know they invented gunpowder before the Europeans.
Yeah.
So can you show me the chattel slavery they did to other people outside of China?
Well, like if we count Mongolians as a
now, as we know, the Chinese made the Great Wall of China to keep the Mongolians out for fear of what they might do to them.
Okay.
So I can't call the Mongolians Chinese. I said Chinese. Okay. Yeah, the Mongols was a different thing.
Okay.
If you want, we can talk about Mongolia if you want. the Mongol. Well, we could talk about them, but and Genghis Khan and so forth. But I'm talking about the Chinese because Chinese have been quite stable. And the Mongolians, they never had a boat, and the example you gave me was boats.
Right. They did actually try and invade Japan, though. For example, once they kind of reached the far edge of China, they tried to invade Japan and were like beaten back.
Did they practice chattel slavery?
They enslaved others, but it was mainly for military reasons.
But it's yeah. So if you're gonna consider chattel slavery, if you're gonna consider chattel slavery to be kind of erasing people's culture and having a kind of supremacist outlook, then that wouldn't count as chattel slavery. But I think you would say that they kind of enslaved people, put them to hard work, kind of maybe kind of didn't consider their rights fully as human beings, that sort of thing.
So you're saying that as long as there's a people group that has the power, they will always look to other people groups to enslave and conquer and take their resources. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think there's a risk of that happening with.
So once again, you're in your own body, and you've lived your own experience, and being in your own body and living your own experience, you think that way. But being in my body, I don't think that way. Now, when I gave you the example of Mansa Musa, it might seem far-fetched fairy tales, but
no, it's happening.
But what I'm saying is, I'm talking about power and having the ability to do something. The stories that have been documented. That wasn't said. The only time I start seeing that in certain nations is when there is an influence from other nations, right? Because we always can influence others. But before those, it's like, for example, right? You might call yourself white, I might call myself black. But there was a time where we didn't understand these identifications, right? These identifications come with a political narrative, right? So if you went back in time and you went to Rome and go, me and you're white, they were, first of all, they won't understand what you're saying because you're speaking a language they don't get. But if they did, they'd go, what does that even mean?
Yeah, like you're a ghoul, you're...
Yeah. Do you know what I mean? They might even use those terms, who knows, right? Yeah, so what I'm saying is, that's how it works, right? Influence and sometimes it's hard to think. It's like, can you imagine how you were before the phones were invented?
Before
phone, you know, smartphones, I should say. How old are you? Are you a young guy?
Yeah, no, I'm a bit old. I'm old enough to remember, like, not smartphones.
Right, you look young.
Okay,
right, but what I'm saying is, there's many, like, I can remember when there was no. And
I see what you're saying.
I'm trying to think, how do I even get from A to B? Because I'm always using the maps.
Yeah.
But I did it before using landlines and the sun, or whatever, the moon. You know what I mean? I managed to find the person's house.
Okay.
So this is what it is. It's hard to imagine.
Okay.
But if you can give me examples of other nations doing similar things, so be it. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I would say that maybe you're right. Maybe because the Europeans were doing it first. But I always go back to that example of the Chinese invented gunpowder and they were making fireworks. Then the Ottomans took it and started making cannons. And then the Europeans took it and made pistols. With those pistols, they took over the world.
Yeah.
Now the Chinese could have went back and go, there guys have made good pistols. Let's do it, but they didn't.
Yeah.
They carried on doing what they were doing.
Yeah. They have been pretty content Chinese once they consolidated the kingdoms.
Yeah.
Then there was maybe like a little bit of aggression towards like Indochina, like kind of Malaysia and South China.
And they were invaded by the Mongol, by the Khans and so forth, and then they integrated, and then they were kicked out and all this.
Sure.
Yeah. So.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. Thanks for.
There you go,
for
James.
so long.
It's
James. Yeah.
Yeah. Is it James?
Oh, the username is James SC on YouTube.
Right. And why did you come to Speaker's Corner?
I initially came because I saw some videos on YouTube of Speaker's Corner of like these arguments that like, this cell phone is so complicated, it must have a designer. You're even more complicated. So yeah, I kind of feel like those arguments are kind of poor. I want to kind of argue against those arguments. I know, and that was the main reason.
So you'll come to disprove deities, is that?
Yeah, and like if I hear something that kind of sounds wrong to me, then I'll kind of sort of want to correct it, no matter what it's about, and to some extent.
Right.
So like for example, I wanted to sort of interject myself a little bit in you and Raspect's conversation because I didn't quite agree with the characterization of slavery across the board in Africa. So that's why.
Yo, stop smoking.
So the thing is,
it's more of a hobby for me, like a sort of bad hobby, I guess.
What was the last thing you rectified within yourself that you found wrong? But there was a way you were thinking that you now today identify as wrong. And what was it that made you come to that conclusion?
The last thing I rectified in me that I thought was wrong was like a little bit kind of sort of how I treated family members. So I'm not going to like go into that much more detail about it.
That would be an interesting story, to be fair, but we could learn from it. But if it's your private life, that's okay. Has there ever been a way you've been thinking historically that today you would think is very negative and is counterproductive, as in the way you were behaving in your day-to-day?
Oh, right. I think like the main examples that are coming to mind are me failing to be more positive rather than me kind of actively being negative, I'd say.
Right.
So I could obviously kind of do more to kind of make the world a better place in many different ways, but I haven't done those things.
Why are you not trying to make the world a better place?
It just doesn't align with my interests. Like, well, it's the reason why people don't do anything. It's because they don't really want to, I guess.
Yeah. Why do you think you don't want to do that?
Like, because I have other things I'm more interested in.
Because I actually want to make the world a better place, and I actively do that. I try to do that.
Okay.
So
I hope you don't feel like I've been sort of counterproductive or like hindering to
No.
talking to you about this today.
Speaker's Corner is for people to speak, right?
Sure.
And to find out about why we do what we do.
Yeah.
And so like you said, you came down because you heard that people they believe in deities. And you wanted to disprove those deities by the watch, the phone theories.
Yeah, since learning more, like I have kind of also kind of wanted to dispel some misinformation and point out some
like what?
Well, like sort of some misinformation about kind of evolution and sort of scientific thinking in general. There's like quite a bit of like a superstition and I think non-productive thinking, and also sort of pointing out sort of like some poor morals within kind of traditional Sharia law, which kind of some kind of traditionalist kind of Muslims will kind of defend like dogmatically, but I think it's good to kind of show that they wouldn't want it to apply to them, so they shouldn't like inflict it on others or think that it's ideal to inflict that on others.
So it would be right in saying you're for like the scientific method.
Yeah.
You're potentially either agnostic or atheist.
Yeah, I'm agnostic.
And is there any value? So the people you were coming to disprove or just correct, was there any value in the way if they were thinking that you might think might be valuable for them in their culture?
Yeah. There are definitely like valuable things from their culture. Like,
that might be able to influence your culture, your way of.
Yeah, like zakats. It would be great if we had that, like this kind of tradition of giving a good amount of charity every year, sort of almost no matter what. Like.
So what I'm noticing is within the culture you subscribe to, you don't try to make the world a better place, and you don't give to charities.
So
No, I'm not judging. I'm just trying to summarize.
So it's not as wide comparatively. Kind of like I think it could be fair to say that kind of Western Europeans don't give as much of their proportion of income in charity, like kind of on average, as kind of Western European Muslims.
What do you think that is?
Like it's sort of a tradition that they've just like picked up from Islamic teaching.
No. Why do you think the Western Europeans don't give as the Muslims do?
Because
is it because they have no spiritual connection like the Muslims do, or they just
I think it would be because it isn't emphasized as much.
There's no authority in your life that makes you review these kind of processes.
Well, you can't like kind of look at me as a data point and kind of extrapolate that to
I'm not.
society.
I'm actually talking to you. You mentioned European. I was talking about you personally.
Yeah, sure.
Because I like talking to the minds of you. But if you want to equate your behavioural patterns to the whole of Europe, that's fine.
No. I thought that was what was sort of going on here a little bit as well. But like, let's just talk about me in particular.
Yeah, you. Because I can't summarize Europe for you, but maybe you can. But I don't know. But I'm just fine because I was establishing why you came down to Speaker's Corner.
Yes.
And you talked about the phone and disproving certain things.
Yes.
So yeah, I'm wondering why, the emphasis was spent on disproving the belief of deities and so forth. But I was wondering if there was anything that they were doing that you found quite valuable, and you said giving charity. And then the question was, why don't you? And then we had this kind of...
I see. So, sorry to get sidetracked. I don't want to say that I don't give to charity at all. I do. I like kind of sort of donate monthly things to 3 different charities. But the thing is that I could do more though.
Would you say your family are okay financially, or they could be doing better, or you have some kind of...
They're okay.
They're okay, right? So you have a kind of like... So it's not that you're not homeless or anything like that.
No.
And your mum and dad potentially might have a house?
Yeah.
Right. So a lot of the people I know who do give to charity, they don't own their own house. They are struggling financially.
My parents, by the way, give much more to charity.
Than yourself?
Yes.
So, okay, that's good. But what I'm saying is, a lot of the people where we're talking about, people you're disproving, they don't own their own houses, they are struggling, and they still give to charity. Do you understand what I'm saying? So I'm interested in that dynamic where you have people who actually have but don't give, and people who don't have but give. It's an interesting way to think of stuff.
Yeah.
But that's just me putting stuff out there, innit? But this is too loud, so I'm going to kick back James.
Okay.
I'm going to kick, maybe next time we'll talk and we'll chop it up.
Okay,
but
sure.
yeah, have a good one, bro. And you might have a good one,
I think
brothers,
you're a really good speaker. I've enjoyed seeing a lot of your kind of discussions and the way you kind of cut to the issue in a way that doesn't increase the harshness, makes the conversation go more effectively. It's good in lots of ways.
Yeah, and if anything I'm talking about, you're welcome to jump in, add your 10 pence piece whenever I'm speaking. So just make sure you jump in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Have a good one, guys. Have a good one, man. Peace.
Recording in the dark.
I don't know why I said that, man. But I got love for Jeddah. Jeddah's my brother, innit? And I know Jeddah will back him. So I didn't need to say that. Anyone sees this thing with Jeddah, tell him that Modi is love. And Jeddah is my brother, and I know Jeddah will back it. But it's just a misunderstanding, innit? I just want people to know that. I don't know how to contact Jeddah. I saw him here, I showed him, I said to him, I got love for him. There was a misunderstanding. I was disgusted. Just show Jeddah everyone.
I beg you to turn off the mic and just the mic and everything for me.
Yeah, just I can't feel so bad in my heart why I said that, what I did. I just showed Jeddah everything that everyone knows Go on, we got our barrister on site, mate. Always available 24 hours a day, yeah?
Is that Raspek?
Yeah.
Yes, bro. I'm going, yeah.
Ah, bless you, bro. Take care.
Check soon. I'll come check you soon, yeah?
Yeah, 100. Yo, I really know.
The mic here, you got to lift up. There's. I'll tell you what. Hold.
Come take over everything from your humanity. Come, man, say it straight. Man, don't listen to BBC. Man, don't listen to ITV.
Yeah, so I just want to make a video because a lot of Indians claim that Pakistanis come from Indian origin, and Pakistanis and Indians are exactly the same thing. And a lot of people come to the extent that say that Pakistanis and India, they were basically one geographical map, and they were only divided by a political tension, basically. And I'm here to debunk this myth that Pakistanis and Indians are the same people. Just because the British Empire conquered Pakistan and India into one empire, it does not mean that they were part of the same nation. The concept of countries only existed in the 18th century. Before that, it was just